They say the countryside has a memory, a slow and patient kind of recall that holds the weight of years like dust in its hollows. If that is true, then the snow in March of 1922 at Hinterkaifeck kept the imprint of a night no one could explain. And when spring came, it kept the odor of a house that had been used and then abandoned with the careless familiarity of a thief. This is the story of a farm behind a hamlet, of ordinary lives and an extraordinary violence, and of questions that have resisted even the most diligent searchers for generations. Hinterkaifeck, in the foothills of Bavaria, was precisely what its name promised, a farmstead hinter, or behind, Kaifeck, alone, small, hemmed by forest. The house sat a mile from the village, flanked by fields and the hush of trees. In a country still reshaping itself after the First World War, a place like Hinterkaifeck was the kind of refuge that kept to itself. Life there ran on routine, milking, mending, baking, and the small economies of neighborly exchange. It was not a scene of dramatic wealth, but of the modest holdings that sustained people through lean years. The family who lived there at the end of March 1922 were practical people whose names would later be listed in cold police files, but whose lives had once been ordinary and textured. Andreas Gruber, sometimes spelled differently in the record books, was in his 60s. Neighbors described him as a man of small means and many habits, stubborn, frugal, particular. Victoria Gabriel was his widowed daughter, carrying the weight of the household and her children after the war had taken her husband. Victoria's children, little Cecilia, 7, and Joseph, 2, made a household ordinary in the way young ones do, messy and noisy, always needing something. A new maid arrived on March 31st, 1922, Maria Baumgartner, hired to help with chores, and for reasons we can guess: wages, a place to sleep, honest work. These 6 people, Andreas, the elder Cecilia, Victoria, her 2 children, and Maria, were the 6 whose lives ended in a single week that the neighborhood would never forget. What follows belongs to the category of events we call unspeakable, acts that insert themselves into a community and never allow it to settle. On the night between March 31st and April 1st, 1922, all 6 of the people at Hinterkaifeck were murdered. Investigators later concluded the weapon was a mattock, a heavy farming tool with the capacity to crush bone. The method was brutal and intimate. Some victims were struck where they slept, others were taken into the barn. 4 bodies were discovered in the barn, 2 remained in the house. But the sequence, the voices, and the last moments are lost. What remains is the hard fact of those names and a score of small, telling details. One of the most chilling facts of this crime is not only the violence, but the aftermath. Whoever committed it apparently did not flee immediately. For days after the killings, neighbors reported smoke rising from the chimney at Hinterkaifeck, footprints in the snow that led towards the house but seemed not always to leave, and the impression that someone was tending the animals, feeding the stove, and using the house as if they belonged there. Witnesses later remembered glimpsing a light in a window. Imagine a person sitting in a kitchen where corpses lie in the loft and the barn, tending a kettle, stirring a pot, finishing the chores, as if life could go on. It is an image that forces the mind into a kind of double horror, that of a slaughter and of its ordinary domestic continuation. The endless question of why they were murdered first cementates to a simple truth: the murder was unforgettable. And further, the narrative of this crime becomes a tale of how uncertainty breeds fear, and of minor details that keep the investigation open.